from Mr. Bissell, including a very rare and beautiful purple orchid that Culliker Fen is very famous for. And after he told us about the fen and about everything that we were going to see there, we headed in our waterproof boots and our rain gear down into the fen itself. It was still dark and rainy as we began our walk down the hill to the fen, but then just as we got to the fen itself, the sun came out, the rain stopped, and it was really just a magical, beautiful place. And when we got to the fen, Jim told us how to identify and avoid the poison sumac. That was actually the first thing he told us when we got there. And then we very carefully followed him through the fen, trying not to sink into the mud and into the ground as best as we could, although at one point I really did sink in up to the very top of my boots. It was hard to get my leg out from there. So Jim stopped many times along the walk and talked to us about all the lush and fascinating array of ferns and sedges and plants and insects, and these were all things I had never seen before. It was amazing to be able to experience all those things, and so close to my home. So after the special time in the fen, we returned to the top of the hill, and Jim Bissell said his goodbyes. But some of us stood around longer and talked, even though it had started to rain again. And one of the members of the group then told us the story about how Dr. and Mrs. Culliker had discovered the fen. And I learned at that point about the personal sacrifices that the Cullikers had made to protect the fen from encroaching development. And I had just personally experienced the magic of the fen thanks to Jim Bissell. And now I was listening to the inspiring and really touching story of the people who not only made my experience possible, but who persevered in the face of a cultural and economic climate that was more interested in making money from the land than in protecting, conserving, and preserving this uniquely special place for generations to come. And it was at that point that I thought to myself, the Cullikers are true heroes of conservation. And the idea for an event to honor the conservation heroes of Geauga County was born. I'd now like to introduce this year's Heroes of Conservation poet, Jenny Clark. Jenny is a teacher, a poet, a grandmother, and a nature lover, and she's led journal writing classes since 1986. Her focus this year is returning to the body, the journal, and self-care. At sunrise or sunset, she walks beside a lake, looking, listening, and discovering new delights. Her poems have appeared in small magazines, including recently the 50th anniversary issue of The Listening Eye. She's assembling her next chapbook of poems, which will be called 43 Years at Paw Paw Lake. For many, many years, Jenny and I attended the same poetry workshop, and I've had the pleasure of hearing her read her poetry many, many times. I know that we're all in for a really big treat today. Please welcome Jenny Clark.
I think I'll have to stand over here too. Thank you so much for inviting me to read today. I'm honored to be part of this celebration. My first poem is about a tree that barely gets any attention until it blooms. Story. Honey locusts spill their vials of fragrance into late spring air, like clusters of pearls unknotting and falling into the folds of a silky dress. I tilt my head toward creamy gowned woods, as if catching the scent of long ago. Like ordinary people, transformed by regard, these trees let down the sweet milk of their essence, offer themselves as subtly as a half-glimpsed smile. Hiking at Headwaters Park. Liquid light gathers at tips of leaves, then fractures and flies. Rain thickens and soaks, streams from my face. No insects are flying. No bees come to tend the white violets. All is mute, except for the voice of this shower and the rush of a creek in its iron-stained bed. White petals scatter from wild cherry blossoms, the air itself white streaked. I am carried by motion, through motion, at ease, in pure flow. Excuse me. So for me, this has been a year filled with hawks. I've seen so many of them, and I have brought 2 poems that are about hawks. Message. A hawk calls from high in the trees, and I hear an answering call from the woods. All my life, something in me has cried out in just this way. Some call it soul, but I know it rises from my body. Like the piercing voice of the hawk, it trusts in reply. The sky is indigo, the lake is calm, and as I watch and listen, the pale-breasted hawk swoops low above me. I catch my breath with the joy of this, with a sudden sense of belonging. It's easy to forget, to believe dark thoughts, to fear we're alone in this frightening world. Tonight, the hawk came close enough to tell me otherwise. Another hawk at Pawpaw Lake. Yesterday, a red-shouldered hawk perched in a dead ash tree. I watched her with binoculars as she tore and ate her prey. Feathers flew, bloody bits glistened in her beak. I couldn't be sad. Instead, I watched in wonder, the light in her piercing black eyes, the grip of her sharp-clawed feet. Checkered wings and rosy shoulders angled up and down. Golden legs maneuvered on the branch. For weeks, she has haunted our yard, the clear whistle of her call announcing her presence. Our friend Rick once said, "God wants you dead." You, meaning us, every living thing. It's hard to argue with mortality, but I can't help wondering if the angel of death will come for me on wings as beautiful as these. I have a couple more. Becoming. This one I wrote for my older granddaughter on her 21st birthday. She loves mushrooms and all sorts of fungi, and so that's part of this poem. Becoming. The fruiting bodies of mushrooms open their delicate umbrellas, sending forth offerings, while below ground, the dark mycelia work their magic, finding nourishment, making connections, creating possibilities. Who knows how the mind and body sort out what matters, choose for us the next necessity. One day, we have only confusion. The next, the path ahead, is clear. We come to trust the fertile darkness, where mysterious threads stretch toward us, even as our own reach out. The world's need and our gifts, finding each other. Witch hazel.